Choosing a nursing home can cause a lot of anxiety and feelings of guilt for families. The decision to place a family member under the care of a nursing home facility is usually made when health and/or mental capabilities have declined and the family is no longer sufficiently able to care for their loved one. All facilities must ensure and protect the rights of every resident and provide a clean and healthy and attractive environment. Residents are entitled to treatment regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, ability to pay, or source of payment. You may not be aware that you can review the state surveys of each nursing home that you have an interest in because Medicare and Medicaid facilities are required by law to let you see their survey reports. Every resident has the right to receive medical care, nursing care, rehabilitative and restorative therapies, and personal hygiene in a safe, clean environment. It is imperative to do your homework when choosing a nursing home facility to avoid any instances of foreseeable abuse, neglect, and death that continue to be reported within nursing home facilities nationwide every day. Every resident has the right to be treated with consideration, respect, and dignity in full recognition of his or her individuality. This includes privacy during medical treatment and care of personal needs. People not involved in the care of residents should not be present during examinations and treatment without consent from the resident. Every resident should be encouraged and assisted to exercise his or her right to voice grievances and recommend changes in policies and services to facility staff and/or outside representatives of his or her choice without fear of coercion, discrimination, or reprisal. As this next tragic story will show you, the story of Karin Kennedy, a 92-year-old woman, everything that could go wrong in a nursing home actually did. In 2004, Karin was sexually molested by one of St. John's Nursing Home's certified nursing assistants, Joseph Piccoli, on 4 separate occasions at the Jackson Hole, Wyoming facility. Reports had been made to the management of St. John's Nursing Home about these 4 independent acts of sexual molestation, yet the management denied they had ever received any report of sexual misconduct and refused to do anything about them. You will see and hear sworn testimony of some of St. John's employees who reported having seen Piccoli's sexual misconduct and then were retaliated against by certain managers and supervisors. Each one gives detailed and graphic descriptions of personal observations of how Piccoli engaged in obvious sexual misconduct with Karin Kennedy and how they had each reported what they had seen to their managers. Yet no investigation was conducted until an outside ombudsman was called in to the home. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines to report how Vance Countryman, the lawyer for the children of Karin Kennedy, confronted the administration of St. John's Nursing Home with its failure to protect their mother from Piccoli, who had repeatedly abused her, and how Vance got justice for Karin and her family in November 2007. A congressional report has found that over 30% of the 5,283 nursing homes in the United States were cited for abuse violations causing harm between January 1999 and January 2001. Over 2,500 of these violations were serious enough to cause real harm and to place residents in immediate jeopardy of death or serious injury. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Lander, Wyoming, at the law firm of Vance Countryman. It's my great pleasure to introduce Vance Countryman to the show. Welcome to the show, Vance.
Thank you.
We have a very interesting case that we're going to discuss today, and it's a case regarding nursing home abuse. But before we get into it, this is the kind of case that you really became a lawyer, right? This is why you became a lawyer.
Absolutely. This is a case which screamed for justice, which the system turned its back on, And but for trial lawyers, these people, this family, would have been victimized and there would have been no justice.
Tell us about this case. The victim was Karin Kennedy. She was a 92-year-old woman, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Karin Kennedy, she was having difficulty with dementia, just being able to remember where she was going. Those kinds of things were becoming more and more difficult. And her family wasn't able to provide her with the care that she needed. And so they looked and found the St. John's nursing home in Jackson, Wyoming, and placed her there. And they put her there because they understood it was a place where their mother would be safe and would be cared for.
And that didn't exactly happen, did it?
No. In fact, she was repeatedly abused by a man who was taking sexual liberties with her. The part that makes it so egregious as his conduct was, what is more egregious is that these multiple incidents, separate incidences, were reported to the administration by different people, and they did nothing to remove the offender from the midst of what, in essence, it's like leaving the sheep in the hands of wolves.
Well, the fox in the hen house.
The fox in the hen house.
Let me ask you, why do you think management, when it was brought to their attention, didn't take action to fire this guy?
It is amazing that they did nothing, but that's what they did. Piccoli had a close relationship of some kind, and I'm not trying to define what that is. I'm just saying that one of these administrators favored him.
Joseph Piccoli was a certified nursing assistant.
He was.
And he was the one victimizing the 92-year-old woman. And for our audience, what exactly was he doing to her?
He was touching her breasts, kissing her, fondling her. And he was...
And she was wheelchair bound, wasn't she?
She was.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was observed by at least 4 separate individuals on 4 separate incidences engaging in inappropriate conduct.
Fortunately, you videotaped a lot of the depositions of the people who did report on Joseph Piccoli to management. We also have some depositions of the management and their reaction. And the very first one we're going to go to is Ann, I believe her name is Herod, right?
It is Ann Herod.
Who was a former RN, a team leader. We're going to go to that deposition right now.
Did you have an aide named Joseph Piccoli that worked for you?
Yes.
Okay. Would you have been his supervisor?
Yes.
Did you ever become aware of allegations that Joseph Piccoli was engaged in inappropriate conduct with any residents?
I know one day I came to work, and it was on a Monday, and I was off on the weekends. And there was just a sense when I came to work that day that something was, something had happened over the weekend. When I talked to my supervisor,
Who was
Jeannie Friss,
okay.
she said that some CNAs had come to her that morning and talked to her about what had happened that weekend.
What did they say to her?
I was not there. My understanding was that he had been in the shower room with a resident for an inordinate amount of time. What she told me is that there had been a shower that weekend. They couldn't find Joseph, and they realized that he'd been in the tub room, shower room, with this resident for a long time. I believe she said over an hour.
Okay. And that information was conveyed to Jenny Friess?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what the allegations were that were buzzing around.
A CNA told me that she had witnessed Joseph touching a resident on the breast.
Who was the CNA?
Yes.
And you did what with that information?
Carol had already talked to Jeannie, and then I went right away and talked to Jeannie as well and said, are you aware of this? What are we doing?
And what did Jeannie Friess say to you?
Um, at the same time, again, I was having the job performance issues and concerns. Jeannie came into my office, and it got a little rough, and she said, I said, you know about the situation. I'm concerned about Joseph's job performance. And she got very upset with me and raised her voice, and she said, what do you want me to do?
Did she acknowledge the report that had been made to her by Carol Moss?
Yes, and she said that Marty was aware of it.
Are you aware of any corrective action taken against Joseph Piccoli after your recommendation?
No.
Are you aware of him being sent home or put on leave with pay pending an investigation into these allegations?
Yes.
We've just heard Ann. We've just heard that she reported the incidents and that sort of thing. When you took this deposition, what were your thoughts?
First, I was concerned about how brave these people were, because several of the people we deposed were still employed by the nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very concerned that they would be unable to remember. I think that's a fairly
Convenient.
common,
Yeah.
very convenient response.
Yeah.
But they were brave, and they stepped up, and they gave a factual, detailed statement of what they observed. And more importantly, they identified the supervisors who they reported this information to.
Yeah, Ann says this right in her deposition. She reported to her supervisor, and she was a team leader.
Right.
A registered nurse team leader. We have another deposition that we're going to go to. One of the other CNAs, a brave woman, Diane Jackson.
Yes.
Let's go to that right now.
Please state your name.
Diane Louise Jackson.
Was there ever an occasion when you observed Mr. Piccoli engage in inappropriate conduct?
Yes.
Tell me when did this happen?
I do not have dates. I did not feel that I was going to need dates. I didn't write them down, but I believe it was in March approximately of 2004.
Where was this at?
It was in the room of a patient or a resident,
Okay, whose room?
Karin Kennedy.
And where were you at when you observed this?
I was at the door and had just opened the door slightly and noticed him sitting on the bed, his back to me. She was in her wheelchair facing him, and he had his hand under her sweater. She had her dress on, so it was between this dress and the sweater on her breast.
What did you do with this information?
I gave it to Jeannie Freese.
Did you tell her personally?
I did.
Was there any delay from when you saw it until you went to Jeannie Freese?
Now, when I left the room, she was standing by the nurse's station walking towards her office. I stopped her and told her immediately. I just observed Joseph with his hand on Corinne's breast.
What was her response?
You must be mistaken. And she continued to walk to her office.
Did there ever come a time when you felt that there was some kind of reprisal or retribution for having made that response?
Yes, I did. I cannot say that there was any specific thing that happened that made me feel that way, but I did.
Is it your opinion that the reprimand was the result of the report from Mr. Piccoli?
Yes.
Are you aware of other incidences where Mr. Piccoli was engaged in inappropriate conduct?
Yes.
Tell me about the next event that you recall.
Okay. It was, he used a gate belt to secure a patient to a toilet.
Okay. In addition to that, are you aware of other incidences where he acted inappropriately?
That other people had seen the same type of situation that I had seen.
Okay.
And may I go back a step? Joseph Piccoli would come to the dining room and hold hands with Karin Kennedy in the dining room.
Did he do that with other residents?
No.
Investigation that occurred as a result of your report?
No.
Were you ever interviewed by the administration?
No.
Do you know if Mr. Piccoli was sent home or given leave?
No.
Do you understand, is that a standard practice?
Yes.
You reported an incident to Mrs. Freese about observing Mr. Piccoli touching Karin Kennedy's breast. And did it appear to you, based on that report, that Mrs. Freese was in fact tolerating his conduct?
Yes.
This deposition of Diane shows that when she reported it, they took action against her, didn't they?
That's right. I don't think people understand how brave it is to stand up and put everything you have. I mean, her job, which is her health insurance, her retirement, all that is at risk because she's trying to do the right thing. And in this particular case, we have an administration who is doing its level best to turn a blind eye to these allegations.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is they didn't even go, I think at a later time, they went and questioned Karin Kennedy, but she suffers from dementia. But they really weren't concerned about her welfare, like all of us who put parents in nursing homes, right? We want to be concerned. We want to make sure there's safeguards there that are going to protect our loved ones, don't we?
It's terrible. First, children deal with the guilt of placing their parent in a nursing home. I mean, we're all sitting here thinking to ourselves, they raised us, they took care of us, they were there when we were children. You know, we owe them this. The difference is, though, these people have needs that can't be met in the home.
Yes.
They physically cannot be taken care of at some juncture. And so then this loved one makes the decision to put their parent, who they understand is vulnerable, in that kind of an environment with the hope and the prayer. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be a hope and a prayer. And that's exactly where we came in. But they're trying to put them in an environment where their parents can live the rest of their life without being at risk.
Yeah. We're going to go to the former director of nursing, Jeannie Frisk, in her deposition because it is almost as outrageous as Joseph Piccoli's. Let's do that right now.
Please state your name.
My name is Jeannie Friss.
Do you recall any reports that anyone had seen Joseph Piccoli engage in sexually inappropriate conduct with a resident?
No, sir, I don't.
Same question with 2004. Did you receive any reports in 2004 that alleged that Joseph Piccoli had been observed doing something inappropriate, sexually inappropriate with a client?
No, sir.
In 2005, did you receive any reports that alleged that they had observed Joseph Piccoli engage in sexually inappropriate conduct?
One time.
Okay. Tell me what the report was.
That he was seen kissing.
Do you recall receiving reports about an open-mouth kiss between Joseph Piccoli and Karin Kennedy?
No.
It's amazing to watch her deny that she had any reports when all of these other people, her subordinates, had reported this to her. What was your feeling about her?
Well, I have to tell you, of all the depositions we did, this was the deposition that I most looked forward to. Because if she admits that the reports were made, there isn't any question that they are responsible. And if she denies it, then all these other people are not telling the truth.
They're all liars.
So somebody's lying, if that's the question, and if that's the way that she testifies. And she did. She denied across the board that she ever received any report of inappropriate conduct by Mr. Piccoli.
Why do you think she was covering for Joseph Piccoli? Because it would have been pretty easy to fire the guy, wouldn't it?
Oh,
I mean, that would have solved the problem.
I don't have to have a reason to terminate
Yeah.
you as long as I don't cross the forbidden lines. And I'm
Yeah.
telling you, there isn't any reason here. He's a white male who has no disabilities.
Yeah.
They have no exposure. So to keep him on makes absolutely no sense given the gravity of the allegations that were being made.
They could have fired him. They could have settled it quietly. They chose not to do that. Why do you think that she covered this up?
I think that they believed that they had buried it sufficiently that it would not come to light and it would just disappear. Mrs. Kennedy had passed away, and the children were living in other communities, and I think that they believed that this would just disappear.
To me, when I looked at all of these depositions and I was doing the research in this case, what my feeling was, she just didn't care about Karin Kennedy. And I think that extends to everybody at that nursing home. They didn't care enough, because if that was her mother, right, things might have been totally different, right?
Well, one of the things you'll note when you watch these depositions is the lack of emotion. Even in the people that reported it,
Yeah.
the lack of emotion to Karin Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
They become a number, a non-entity, a non-person. The one deposition which really touched my heart was of Karin Kennedy's doctor.
Mm-hmm.
She teared up, and she was truly touched
Yeah.
by the fact that her patient was left in an environment and that she didn't have enough information. She didn't know about these allegations
Yeah. Well,
to intervene and protect her from the abuse.
yeah, we have some other depositions we're going to go to, but everybody in America today is concerned about leaving their loved ones, their parents, who
They
may
should
not be as cognizant of their surroundings as they once were, in the hands of people like this. And that brings me to the next deposition that you took of John Hartman, who was another CNA, who also stepped forward bravely. And is he the one that contacted the ombudsman? I don't think he was.
I don't remember specifically. My recollection is it was a woman that made that call.
I think you're right about that. But let's go to that deposition so we can hear what he has to say about this.
Was standing there.
Meaning, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, did it appear to you that he was looking to see if the coast was clear for him to do what he was going to do?
Yes.
Okay. And what was it that he then did after he looked around the area?
He bent down and he kissed Karin Kennedy. And my impression of that was, it seemed to me like he was French kissing Karin Kennedy. That's
Okay.
the impression I got.
Okay. Once you observed this, what did you do, if anything, having seen Mr. Piccoli act the way he did?
Once I observed what he did, and it was done, he walked away. And it was change of shift. So I went ahead and followed through and checked on my other resident. Later that evening, I'm not going to assume, I'm just going to say that once I got my people and my job done, settled down, I reported it to one of my nurses that was on duty.
Did he ask you to document the report?
No.
I am glad we have people like John Hartman, like these other CNAs, who are willing to step forward, jeopardizing their job possibly, their security, their medical care and everything. Now the most interesting deposition that you took was of the perpetrator himself, Joseph Piccoli. We're going to watch this right now, and let's see what he has to say about his actions.
Please state your name.
Joseph Piccoli?
So you were never confronted by the administration of St. John's regarding allegations that you had been touching a female resident's breasts?
I was confronted shortly before I was fired.
Okay, so try to give me a time frame when that meeting happened.
First week of February 2006.
Okay, so prior to the first week of February 2006, you were not confronted by the administration regarding the allegations that you had been seen touching a resident's breast?
No.
So prior to February 2006, did any administrator of St. John's confront you about having been seen with a resident partially nude and you standing close behind her, your pelvis touching her buttocks?
No.
Prior to February 2006, did St. John's Nursing Home ever confront you about kissing a resident of St. John's?
Yes.
When did that happen prior to February 2006?
It happened twice. The first time was late summer of 2006. The second time was December 2006.
And were they talking about different incidences?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell me about each incident, please.
The first incident involved a report that I had been seen kissing Karin Kennedy on the lips. The second was also a report that I'd been seen kissing Karin Kennedy on the lips.
Okay, now I want you to think about the dates, because I thought earlier you told me that you left their employment in February 2006. Did I?
I'm sorry, 2005.
Okay, all right. So the first incident would have been late summer, early fall of 2000. Okay. What did they say to you in that meeting?
They said that kissing and hand-holding were unprofessional, that regardless of what my personal intentions or motivations might be, it was the sort of thing that could be misconstrued and that it was inappropriate and I should discontinue.
Why you had done that in light of the first meeting that you had had with them earlier in the year?
Yes, they did.
What was your response?
My response was that after the first meeting and after stopping kissing and hand-holding with Karin, that she had repeatedly asked me why I had stopped kissing her. She repeatedly asked if I didn't care for her anymore, things along that line. And on this particular occasion, when she confronted me in that way, I looked around. We were in the hallway. I looked around. I felt that there was nobody around. I was going to give her a kiss, and that would be the end of it. And someone evidently saw me do that and reported it. No.
Okay. What is your understanding of a diagnosis of dementia?
It is diminished mental capacity of one sort or another.
So they might affect their memory?
That's very common, yes.
Does it affect their ability to understand their surroundings?
Yes.
Can it affect their understanding of where they're at?
Yes.
Can it affect their understanding of the people they're interacting with?
Yes.
So from your perspective, you believe that Karin Kennedy was understood or did not suffer from dementia?
I'm not qualified to make that judgment.
Well, I'm asking you your observations, and you can tell me about that.
My observations is that on the continuum from least to worst, based on the people I saw and worked with at the nursing home, Karin exhibited almost no signs of dementia.
I'm amazed when I watched this deposition, and I watched it a number of times, that he has a sane enough mind to think that Karin wanted to be fondled by him. She's 92 years old. She suffers from dementia, of which he denies. What was your feeling when you deposed him?
Well, to be honest, I had a sick feeling in my stomach through the entire thing. I really wanted him to just tell us honestly what he did. At the point we took his deposition, he has no criminal exposure.
Yeah.
We are not pursuing a civil case against him. We are not asking him to pay for any of these damages. And I just wanted the truth. And even then, even when he had every opportunity, he would not admit.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, who's lying? Is Mr. Piccoli lying, or
Right.
are the other four people lying?
Mm-hmm. We have one other supervisor who is no longer at St. John's, Marty Robers, who admits that she probably should have taken a different course of action. We're going to go to that deposition right now.
Please state your name.
Marty Robers.
Where you finished up?
I was hired as Director of Social Services, and then I moved into the administrator position in June of 2003.
You became aware that someone was alleging that he was touching Karin Kennedy in a sexual manner.
Do you want to describe what you mean in a sexual manner?
Sure. Touching her breasts when her shirt was off, not in a manner consistent with medical care.
The first time I heard that, and I didn't hear the details, I just heard that there were 2 incidents of breast fondling. It's probably the early part, January 2006.
When you heard that, I guess the first question is, how did you hear it?
I heard it from Carol Moss, who was the restorative aide.
What did you do with that information?
I filed it away.
And so when you say you filed it away, do you mean that in a literal sense, or do you mean that you kind of put it in the back of your mind?
I certainly made note of it, and in my mind I said I need to look into this, and that's what I did with it.
Did you make any written notes about the report she made to you?
No,
Did you do anything else with that information?
not at that time.
I understood that St. John's had a written policy that they didn't tolerate abuse of their residents.
That's true.
And yet, no formal investigation began when you received the report from Carol Moss, correct?
That was a mistake on my part.
Mr. Piccoli was not sent home with pay pending an investigation at the point that Carol Moss reported the information to you, was he?
That's correct. He was not sent home.
The manner in which you handled the report from Carol Moss about the breast touching in January of 2005, do you now believe that the policy regarding abuse of residents was followed correctly in that regard, or with regard to that report?
In hindsight, I should have done an investigation right then and there.
As we can see, Marty even admits she probably should have taken a different course of action. Another management person, and even Jeannie Frisk, wouldn't admit this, would she?
That's correct. One of the things that was so difficult's not the right word, frustrating about this case, all of these reports were done verbally. There's no documentation with regard to any of these reports, and there's no policy that any kind of physical abuse or neglect be reported in a written format. So even when somebody does make a report, we're not obligated to do it in writing. So there's no documentation down the road. So now when you have a manager like the director of nursing, she can just simply deny because there's no written documentation to prove or to verify these reports.
There's another couple of depositions that you did, and I'm going to include them right now. One of them is Patricia Nair. She was a CNA. She's a former CNA. And the reason she reported, the reason I'm including her is because she was retaliated against by Jeannie Friss. So let's go to that right now.
Please state your name.
Patricia R. Nair. And as I came into the room, I saw a sweater over on a wheelchair, which was by Karin's bed. And I walked over there to see if that was the sweater that I needed to get. And Mr. Piccoli was standing behind Karin with his hands on her breast.
Okay.
His body was pressed up against her back side.
Where were his hands in relationship to Karin's body?
They were on her breasts.
Was she, what kind of clothing was she wearing above the waist?
She had either a pants or skirt, I can't remember exactly what it was, but the bottom half of her was covered, the top was not.
So she was nude from the waist up?
Correct. And he had his hands on her breast, fondling her head back by her ear.
Oh, I see.
And, he was reaching around her.
What, if anything, did you do with the information that after you saw them?
Well, I went out and took the sweater to my patient, and I was kind of shocked at what I had seen. And I sat there and thought about it, and then I went to report what I'd seen to Jeannie, the director of nursing.
What is Jeannie's last name?
Fries. Well, she basically looked at me and she said, "Oh, I really don't think you've seen what you've seen." And I said, "Jeannie, I did see what I saw."
Are you aware of any other investigations or any other efforts taken by St. John's administration based on the report that you made to Jeannie Fries?
No. And I went to tell Jeannie, as chain of command, you should tell her what, let her know what was going on. And she went like this and about hit me in the face, saying, "I don't need to hear anything you have to say." And I said, "Jeannie, I'm just trying to explain that I'm, putting in for another position." And she says, "You were never cut out to be a CNA anyway."
Once again, we see that here people are trying to do the right thing. There's a system in place, a systemically wrong system that's preventing what is supposed to be the proper care of our loved ones. And we have it happening here. We're going to see this again with Regina Moss, who's another CNA. You must have been flabbergasted when you were taking these depositions.
Well, I was flabbergasted with the fact that people were being so honest about what they observed.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that, I was just astounded that these kind of reports could be made and that the administration would do absolutely nothing to address what was clearly inappropriate conduct.
Yeah. That's a calm, nice word, inappropriate.
That's right.
It was just like totally wrong. Nobody would want their 92-year-old mother being, molested sexually or in a shower with some pervert, right?
Thank you for pointing that out. This man violated this woman.
Yeah.
And he did something that violated the trust that institution was given by this family.
Yeah.
And they literally intended to walk away from the entire thing.
The next deposition, Regina Moss, who is, I think she was at that time still a certified nursing assistant. She was concerned about retaliation. Let's go to her deposition, because she reported this too. Let's go to her deposition right now.
Please state your name.
Regina Carol Moss, Karin Kennedy's room, and he had her pressed up against the end of the bed. Fully clothed. They were both fully clothed, but I guess you could say he had his unit pressed up against her rear end.
So by his
The
unit,
front of him.
how long did you observe him as he stood there pressed against Karin?
I don't know, half a minute. Like I say, when I walked in, he immediately jumped sideways and backwards, away from her.
What did you do with that information?
I went and told
Jeannie who?
Freese.
What position does Jeannie Freese hold in at St. John, or at the time, what position did she hold?
She was director of nursing, I'm assuming. Was it? She was over the nurses, whatever you want to call her.
What and when you say you went, I mean, did you immediately go to her after you observed this?
I couldn't say I went immediately, but it was within that same hour.
That's when you recall. Were you concerned about any form of retaliation?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about why you were concerned.
Well, me personally, I had 2 bad reviews, one from Marty, one from Jeannie in my personnel file, and other people had received different forms of retribution.
We see this time and time again in all of these depositions. People at great risk to themselves try to do the right thing. And you have a couple of supervisors that just shut them down. And they did it because I guess they didn't want problems. They didn't do the right thing. I guess if the world was filled with people doing the right things, you wouldn't have a job, would you?
That's right. It's kind of like, you know, there's an old proverb that talks about turning on the lights.
Yeah.
You know, evil can't exist when light floods the area.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the phrase, but that's exactly what happened here. We literally turned on the lights into the dark recesses of this institution.
Yeah.
To see what was there.
It's interesting, after Piccoli was told not to come into the facility after an ombudsman got involved with it, he came back over the weekend. And the next deposition has the day shift supervisor on the weekends only, Susan Long, who reported this to management, and I don't think anything was done at this time either. I am going to go to the deposition right now of Susan Long.
Please state your name.
Susan Long. I immediately wrote an email to the administrator and hand wrote, well, I didn't handwrite, I did a little top thing of an FYO for you to the CNO at the time. Basically just relaying that Joseph was witnessed fondling Karin's breasts, and that he had also been witnessed kissing Karin. Too is how it was judged.
That's fine, but what I'm asking you is your perception of what was reported to you. How did you perceive the report to be?
That it was more sexual in nature.
Okay.
Truly amazing. Everybody's dragging their feet. A woman's being molested. Your mother, my mother, you know, anybody's mother, right? And nobody's protecting this person. When you have all these depositions done, you have to turn everything over to the other side. They see a pattern of conduct, which is unsettling, cannot be denied. What is their conversations with you? What is their approach?
After the case was settled, the attorney that attended all these depositions made the comment to me that it was one of the worst summers of her life, that sitting through those depositions was gut-wrenching. And I thought that was kind of ironic, because at the point that it's gut-wrenching, nonetheless, they are still defending the misconduct of the administration.
Yeah.
You know, the conduct of Mr. Piccoli is outrageous.
Yeah.
But the greater outrage is from the people who are paid big wages to oversee and make sure this exact kind of thing doesn't happen, and then they turn away from it.
Yeah. As a result of this case, were there not other folks who had parents in there too that started scrutinizing what was going on there? Because Joseph Piccoli was handling other patients too, wasn't he?
Well, I won't mention the other person's name, but I will tell you that there's another family whose mother was there, and who they were very concerned had been subjected to the same kind of conduct that Karin had. And the irony to it is, see, that's the way many of these cases are handled. The embarrassment and all of the emotion that are involved in these cases, it's easier to walk away. And the sad part about that is the people who are left in that environment, they're still subjected to it. If somebody doesn't come forward
Yeah.
and stop the misconduct, there will be other victims and other victimization.
Right. What was the eventual outcome of this case?
There was a confidential agreement reached. There was a public apology made. A scholarship was named in Karin Kennedy's name. That scholarship was for a nursing scholarship,
Yeah.
so that other people could come and acquire an education so they could help people.
You know, this whole show is about elder abuse, about Karin Kennedy. When it seems like everybody was doing the right thing at the St. John's nursing home, where employees were reporting to management, but nothing was being done. I've mentioned on the show about an ombudsman, outside organization, that it was eventually reported to, and because it was reported to someone on the outside, an investigation took place. If, for our audience, if they suspect that their parents are being abused in any way, what should they do to prevent a cover-up? Who should they call? What agencies should they call?
It's my understanding that under federal law, there's a requirement for a state ombudsman. Now, they may
Right.
not actually work for the state, but it would be funded through state and federal programs, and
Okay.
that would be a contact person. The second is, most states have an adult protective services branch of their Department of Family Services state program. And they also are required by law to investigate allegations of abuse or neglect. And it's important to remember, in this case, we were dealing with sexual misconduct.
Right.
But it could be a parent who's not being turned, and they can develop bed sores. They can be put into beds that the devices are not properly used, and they can die or strangle in the way that
Right.
those rails are placed. There's lots of different ways that our elderly are subjected
Right.
to dangers, and
Not being properly fed,
not
being
proper
restrained.
nutrition, being restrained. That's right. There are a lot of different scenarios where our elderly are subjected to harsh and horrible treatment that they don't have to be. And these state agencies will investigate those.
I brought up in the introduction to this show that any nursing home that receives any kind of federal monies, Medicare, whatever, you can find out any kind of reports, disciplinary actions taken against them. This is public knowledge, isn't it?
It is.
You can go online to get
Yes.
it. I want to thank you very much for being on this program, because this is a subject that's becoming much more prevalent in America today, an issue that's becoming much more prevalent because a lot more people are going to nursing homes. And if it wasn't for trial lawyers like yourself fighting for the little guy, a lot of these people would be out of luck. And I certainly hope that you continue the fight. I know you will. And thank you very much for being on the program.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.